and welcome back to Michelle Reads and Vlogs, and today we are talking through my January wrap up. So in January I read a total of 8 books. 4 of them were consumed through audio and 4 were physical reads, whether they were physical books or electronic books, ebooks. With that, I had a really diverse range of ratings in January. So I had 1 5-star read, 4 4-star reads, 2 3-star reads and 1 2-star read. So overall, I would say that that's a pretty good reading month, because a 3-star to me is, you know, it was good, it was okay, but nothing that I'm really gonna shout about and recommend to people. It was just an okay book. So for the fact that there was only 1 2-star, which to be fair was not the worst book in the world, it just wasn't for me, I think overall I had a pretty good month. So we are starting with one of the audiobooks that I read, and that was Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. So this is the 2nd book in the Murderbot series. They're really nice because they are short books. I don't know if they're technically novellas. So listening up to it on audio, it's only about 3 or 4 hours long, which I find really nice if you want to consume a book but you don't necessarily want to get into something really kind of deep and where there's lots going on. It's just a nice one where you can almost just consume it in a day if you want to. And that was exactly what I needed at the time. It was the first book that I read in January. So the Murderbot series, we are following a murderbot. So it is a robot who has been made to protect humans, and they go out on missions in humans in space. It's sci-fi, I should have started with that. So it's sci-fi. They go out on missions and they're almost like a piece of equipment. So when they're not being used, they just go to kind of the storage area and they kind of shut themselves down into a low energy state until they're needed by the humans as a function, as a robot to protect them and potentially murder for them. I can't really say much about the first book because I don't want to ruin it for those people who might want to go and listen to it or read it. But this Murderbot, we basically find out that it is more human-like than a Murderbot should be. And I can't tell you anymore. So the 2nd book, we are following this Murderbot in a new situation. Well, kind of a new situation. They're going back to where they've been before. We're finding out a little bit more about Murderbot's past and something that happened that I think they feel like they were responsible for, but it turns out that maybe they weren't. But they're going to go and figure it out. So I'm going to read you the synopsis because that's going to be far better than me trying to explain it more. So it has a dark past, one in which a number of humans were killed, a past that caused it to christen itself Murderbot. Oh, so they're not all called Murderbots. My short-term memory is terrible, but it only has vague memories of the massacre that spawned that title, and it wants to know more. Teaming up with a research transport vessel called Art, Murderbot heads for the mining facility where it went rogue. What it discovers will change the way it thinks forever. I changed the words a little bit there. So yeah, it's about it going back to this mine. And what I love about both of these books that I've listened to so far is that yes, we're looking at this robot, but it's almost shining a light on the way that humans feel and see things in a reflection of us reading about this robot and how it sees and feels things. So it's really interesting, the layers of depth to this story so far. I think there are 6 of these in total, so really excited to continue, and hopefully, I don't know if I've got the next one on my TBR for next month. I have written my TBR down, but I don't know if it was on there. But yeah, I would really like to get into the 3rd one and to continue with the series. Oh, I should have said as well, I gave it 4 stars, so not like the best book ever. Like a 5 is, wow, this was amazing, I would recommend this to everybody, I will reread this again sometime. But 4 is, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, but maybe not like the perfect book for me. But yeah, really enjoyed that one. The next book that I read in January was my first physical book of the month and of the year, and that was Bookshops and Bonedust by Travis Baldree. So this is a prequel to... What on earth is the book called? Let me look. I told you my short-term memory is terrible at the moment. Where is the book? Legends and Lattes. So Legends and Lattes, the first book that Travis Baldree came out with, is set in a small kind of town, small city, big town, where we've got an orc who is retiring from being a mercenary, and she sets up a coffee shop in this town where no one has heard of coffee. It's a really cozy fantasy. This one is set, I think, 20 years before-ish, and it sees Viv, the orc, in her time working as a mercenary, but she is injured. She's quite young, she's quite kind of rogue and rebellious, and I don't want to listen to what everyone else says, I'm going to do what I want, as we all did when we were young. And she got injured in this kind of one scenario, so they leave her in a town to recover and say, oh yeah, you know, we'll pick you up on the way back. So they leave her there with the doctor, and the doctor helps to sort her out. While she's there, she makes friends with the people in the town. One of them runs the local bookshop, another one runs a local bakery, and it is so good. Again, very cozy fantasy, but what I would say is that the stakes seem a little bit higher in this one than in Legends and Lattes. So in Legends and Lattes, they do put a bit of, you know, a baddie scenario in, but it's not as quite as heavy as this one. I feel like the stakes in this were a little bit higher because of the scenario that they made with this potential kind of bad guy. I can't even remember what they were called, but it was still really enjoyable, still really good, still a really fast and easy book to consume. Yeah, I gave this one again 4 stars. I didn't think it was the most perfect book, but I will definitely keep reading these if Travis Baldree wants to keep writing them, because obviously this is a prequel, it is a separate story to Legends and Lattes. If the one is your thing, the other one is probably going to kind of be your thing as well. And what I would say is this is probably good for people who aren't fantasy readers but want to have a little bit of a go at fantasy because of it being that little bit lighter. Yeah, I thought the characters were great, I thought the setting was great. 4 stars. Next up, we have The City of Stardust by Georgia Summers. And this, I did not read this fantastic, is it Fairy Loot? Yeah, Fairy Loot edition, which I unboxed. I'll put my unboxing video up there. I actually read this as an e-arc through NetGalley. So an ARC is an advanced reader copy, and I, on a whim, just went, okay, I'm going to try and get some of these kind of more hyped, bigger books that are coming out, and this one I was accepted for. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot that I have not been accepted for, but this one was one that I was, so I was like, okay, we are seeing this everywhere at the moment. I want to see what it's about, and the standard cover for this is beautiful. I'll put a picture of it up somewhere so you can see it. And I think the marketing for this, they really went all out. They wanted to sell this. They wanted it to be a big book of the moment. I think they sent out a lot of arcs to get it all over the place. So I'm almost, you know, it's understandable that I got accepted. So The City of Stardust, we follow the Everly family, and we are following from the point of view of the youngest Everly, who is called Violet. She is Violet Everly, and she grows up with her uncles in this old family home. And what has happened is at about the age of 10, I think, her mother left her there, probably even younger, I can't remember. The mom left her there to go out into the world because there is a curse on the Everlys, and it's been there for hundreds of years. The mother is trying to break the curse. She's trying to figure it out so that it doesn't continue into the next generations, and she can therefore protect her daughter. So the daughter's left with the uncles. She grows up not knowing a lot. She turns of age, she becomes like 16, 18. She starts to go to work in a coffee shop, and she starts to learn a lot more about the curse and the world as a whole. And what she finds is that her family are from this world where there are scholars who are almost like people who can do magic. They have keys where they can access doorways to other worlds. And she finds out more about the Everly curse and the fact that someone is taken from each generation as a sacrifice to this person who is almost godlike. And with Marianne, the mom, her generation, her and her brothers decided not to have any offspring so that the curse would end with them. But then Marianne came home and she obviously had got Violet, and they knew that it was going to carry on to another generation. So what we get when Violet becomes old enough is she goes out into this world. One, she's trying to find her mother, who they've not seen or heard of for absolutely years. And two, she's trying to figure it all out for herself. If her mother can't figure out how to break this curse, maybe she can, to save herself. What I would say about this book is, even talking about the synopsis now, I've really struggled, because even though I've read it, it was not straightforward. I feel like the plot was all over the place. The first 50 pages, I was like, this is brilliant. I felt like it was very like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I love. It's one of my favourite books. What's the other one that I always forget the name of? The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. So you've got these very kind of, I'd call them like vibes where it's very kind of ethereal and very poetic, and oh, I love it. I love the style of that writing. I love the style of that world building. But after about 50 to 100 pages, I just started to get lost. I was like, where is this going? What does all of this even mean? Like, the title is called The City of Stardust. I can't even recall if at any point they called it that. They were calling places by different names, and I got a bit lost and confused. I almost felt like there was far too much description, and it just took me away from the plot, from the characters. I didn't really know how I was supposed to feel at different points. Maybe that's on me, because I have seen some other people on Goodreads. After I read it, I like to think like, oh, was it just me who felt this, or did everyone feel it? So I went on Goodreads, and some people, like the majority of people, absolutely loved it. And I was like, did we read the same book? It just didn't hit it for me. And by the end, the outcome was okay. We know I don't DNF books because I'm nosy. I want to find out what happens by the ending. Yeah, I just felt that it was all too wishy-washy. And what I want to see is, so many other people have unboxed this on BookTube. They've hauled it. I've not seen anyone else on BookTube read it yet. So I really want to see what other people genuinely think about this, not just the people who got arcs, because I think when you get an arc, you're more likely to want to rate it higher because you've been given it for free and to read for free. And it's so tempting to want to rate it higher. I think in the book unboxing where I unboxed this from FairyLoot, I think I even told everyone that I gave it 3 stars, completely forgetting that I didn't. I gave it 2. I gave it 2 stars. So this was so far the worst read of the year for me. As I said, I think some people are going to absolutely love it, but didn't hit it for me this time. So at this point of the month, I had read 3 fantasy and sci-fi books, and I felt like I'd had that 2-star from the City of Stardust. I was like, I really need to round out my reading a little bit here. I need to read something that's not fantasy and sci-fi, and something that I know is going to be good. Enter Shuggie Bane by Douglas Stuart. So this was actually the winner. It says it on the title, the winner of the 2020 Booker Prize. I actually listened to this on audiobook as well as having the physical book to follow along in parts. The audiobook was absolutely brilliant. So this is set in and around Glasgow, kind of in the 80s and 90s. The audio narrator, the accents were just absolutely brilliant. I felt immersed in the story. I would say if you feel like you if you like the sound of this one from me talking about it, give the audio a go if audiobooks are your thing. So this follows a young boy called Shuggie Bane, and at the beginning we pick up with Shuggie. He's 16 years old. He's living on his own in Glasgow in like this really horrible bedsit, and he is both working and going to school still. He's still only 16. So he goes to school in the daytime. He works as many hours as he possibly can around that. I think in like a butcher's inside of a supermarket. The sun's just come out and is blinding me. Is it gonna go behind a cloud? Can I move this stack of books to be in the way of the sun? Maybe. Okay, we're covered. I'm just gonna put a sun on my head, it's fine. So, what did I say? He was working in a supermarket. Yeah, so he works in the supermarket in like the butcher's section around his education, and he's basically alone. And then what we see is we go back to his very early childhood, 6 years old, and we see the story of how he came to be on his own 10 years later. We follow a lot about his mother and the rest of his family, and what we see throughout the story is how one by one they've all parted ways for different reasons and how he gets to be alone. We see him living in different living situations, so different parts of Glasgow with different people for different reasons. And what we really get to see here is we get to explore this world of basically poverty in the city during the time of Thatcherism. I know I said it's the 80s and 90s, it must have been the 80s. The closing down of the mines, so a lot of people becoming unemployed, having to claim disability benefit, and how it affected Shuggie and how he grew up through it. So themes in this book, we look at Shuggie finding his sexuality through all of these other things that are going on, living in poverty, learning to look after himself. And what I would say is be careful with trigger warnings for this. I don't think it's so much of a spoiler because it happens from the very beginning, but his mother is an alcoholic and we basically see how she struggles to take care of her family and her own relationships. So this was a 4-star for me, even though I think it was absolutely fantastic. The reason why I didn't quite take it to 5 was because I wanted more of Shuggie. A lot of this book was from his mother's point of view, and I get it because we kind of get into her head, we get why she is like the way she is. It really explores alcoholism and addiction, if that's something that you don't know a lot about. But I did want more of Shuggie. I constantly, because we started with him at the age of 16 being in this situation, I wanted to explore more of his story. And for me, I just felt like the balance was slightly off. But it was brilliant. As I've already kind of mentioned, it was a real learning experience to see more about the time, about the alcoholism, about Shuggie learning through his own sexual identity and how people treated him for it in the 80s. I thought this was brilliant. If you've not read it, definitely give it a go. I would recommend this one. So after listening to Shuggie Bain, obviously literary fiction, which was just brilliant, I went back into the sci-fi and fantasy and I listened to book 6 of the Red Rising series. So this is Lightbringer. It also brings me up to where the writing is at the moment, the releases. This one came out kind of midway through 2023. So now we have to wait for book 7, which will be the final installment, I think, in this set of books. So for those people who don't know about the series overall, with Red Rising, we are following people in a colour cast system where humans are given a colour. They're almost evolved to have this colour from birth. Each kind of section of colours are evolutionarily advantaged, I have not worded that very well, to be good at different jobs and have different skills. So Darrow is born a red. The reds are the bottom of the pyramid of this colour cast system. They are miners. They are full-on labourers. They live under the surface of Mars and are told that Earth is dying, and to save humanity, we need to be able to terraform the other planets in the solar system. So they're kind of fed this information to keep them working, to keep them sacrificing, so that they will keep mining for the substances they're going to terraform the galaxy. And what we find out quite early on is that that's a lie, and actually the galaxy, the solar system, the other planets are already terraformed. The Reds are slaves. So Darrow is taken from the Reds by a Gold, and the Golds are the top of the pyramid. These are the leaders of society. They are highly intelligent people. So Darrow's taken from being a Red. He's physically changed. His entire body is made to be like that of a Gold, and he is thrust into this world, into the society of the Golds, to infiltrate their world and to bring the start of an uprising, hence Red Rising. So that's not so much of a spoiler. That all happens pretty early on in the first book. Then what happens is Darrow goes into this kind of like games. People always say it's like the Hunger Games, but for a bit older and obviously in space. But from there, over the series, what we really get is this space war. And in book 6, I have to think about where I am now. In book 6, we are taken to the edges of the solar system. The war is almost moved into what we call the rim. So we are looking at the moons of the gas giants, because obviously, I'm a science teacher if you didn't know this, by the way. So obviously you can't stand on the gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn. They've got no surface. They're not a rocky planet. You would die if you tried to get anywhere near there. But they do have moons, and a lot of moons. So these moons have all been terraformed. People live there. So the war is almost taken out that way to, it's very political to get different people involved and whatnot. What I would say is that it was brilliant. After reading book 5, or listening to, because this was an audio listen, book 5 was called Dark Age, and it is very dark. A lot of depressing, horrible things happen in that book. Check for trigger warnings if you get triggered easily by books. I don't, so I tend to go in just blind and then think, oh wow, that was terrible. So book 6 is quite positive after this one. It's still a part of the war, you know, so they're winning battles or things are changing, but the war is not won, or in some cases losing battles, I'm not gonna lie. What I would say is, if you go into this, go in with low expectations, and anything that they say is going to happen, don't believe. Something else usually happens, and it takes you on completely different, unexpected journeys. We meet new characters along the way. It is just brilliant. And book 6, I really enjoyed. So I gave this 4 stars, which, to be honest, I've given most of the series. I did look back at the end of this and I was like, are they all 4? Because I really love this and I really hype it up. One book in the series I gave 5 stars to, and that was book 3. Morning Star. I thought that that was brilliant. Most people say that the series does pick up in kind of books 2 and 3. A lot of people say book 2 is their favourite. So what I would say is, if you read book 1 and you kind of think, meh, what's the hype? Keep going. I feel like Pierce Brown, I always want to say Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brown really gets over a lot of the negative details about book 1. So book 1, I'm going to be honest, not great from a woman's point of view. It's very much about kind of the male points of view, and women are used in a way to do what men want. And yeah, that's not obviously great. And I do feel like as you go through, there's a lot of character progression with the females and with the way that men think and feel about the female characters. So a lot of the problems are overcome. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it and cannot wait for book 7, whenever that's going to come out. Probably not even for another year or so, so we'll have a while to wait. So at this point of the month, out of 5 of the books I've read, 4 were fantasy and sci-fi, and again, I felt like I need to consume something that's a bit different. So I went back to a book called The Leftover Woman. I'm going to guess that this is more literary fiction rather than contemporary. And this was obviously one of my book of the month picks. Really helpful. They tell you on the back which month they were picks from. So it was my October book of the month pick. Obviously, I need to have my book shipped from the US, so there is a bit of a delay with mine, but yeah, so this, when I read the synopsis for this, I almost cried. I felt so emotional, and I was like, this is going to be a really deep emotional book. So we are following 2 women, one of which comes from China, and it is in the time of maybe the 90s, when there is the 1-child rule. And if you don't know, this happened over China, I think for 25 or 35 years, where they were trying to limit the population growth. So you could only have 1 child. The problem with that is that men were, or male children, were far more preferred to female, because females, obviously, as they grow up, they've got less, they were just less desirable. They were seen to be less likely to be able to take over family businesses and to look after the family. They would have less power. So if people had females, a lot of the times they would get rid of them. And this is what happened in this book. So we are following our female character. She was actually told that her baby girl had died. So she did not willingly give her up. She was told that the girl had died during childbirth, and that was that. She found out that the girl had not died, and she had actually been adopted to a couple in America. So our other point of view is from a woman in America, in New York, who has adopted the female child. What we see is how these 2 worlds collide, how the mother, the birth mother from China comes over to the US illegally, and how she is trying to get her daughter back. And it's that very kind of morally grey, well, whose side are we on? Because yes, the daughter is biologically the mom's from China. She didn't know for years that her child was still alive. But then we've got the mom in the US who's raised this child as her daughter. She is her daughter. And I just think morally, even with me, I'm like, well, where do I sit with that? What's right? I don't think there is a right, and that's the whole point. And we see these two worlds collide, how it all takes place. What I would say is that I did like this book. I saw everything coming that was going to happen. It was kind of all quite obvious the way it was written, and it didn't make me as emotional as I thought it would. From reading the synopsis, where I was pretty much shedding a tear, I didn't feel that emotionally connected to these people. I read it all quite logically. As I said, it was all very much like this happened and then this happened and then this happened, and I thought the plot of it was really good, but I didn't feel that connected to the characters. So I enjoyed this one. I gave it 3 stars. I wouldn't necessarily rush to recommend it. I think if you're interested in how the one-child rule affected people, maybe have a read, but I'm sure there are probably other books that follow this theme and do it a little bit better. Just my opinion. I don't know if this has been very widely read. I just saw somebody else, Gabby from Gabby Reads. I think she DNF'd it. So if you've read it, let me know what you think, or if you would be interested in reading this one. I'm glad I read it, but as I said, wasn't one of the top books for me. It was just okay. So after this, I felt like I still needed more non-fantasy and sci-fi. So I looked at another Booker Prize winner, which was Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I always struggle to think about how to say her first name. So this book, oh my gosh, brilliant. Before I even tell you the synopsis, this is my only 5-star read of the year so far. I loved it. We are following women who are all different, mostly Black women based in the UK. And what we are doing is following the stories of all of these women. So we basically have lots of short stories from different points of view in here and about different people. But within each set of short stories, the women's lives all cross and intertwine in ways. So like you might read about the mother and then the daughter, you might read about the teacher and then the student. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought seeing different points of view from these different women, they're all different ages, ranging from teenagers all the way up to, I think, 80 or 90 years old. So with the older women, you get a lot of their experiences from their history of being Black women in the UK. With the younger women, you see completely kind of different thoughts, different points of view, because they've all grown up in different times, some of them in different countries, so some of them have emigrated from different countries. There is also one woman in here who I think is not Black. I think she's a white woman, but I think she came from South Africa over to the UK. Anyway, it's just amazing. I think if you love reading about, obviously, immigration, if you love reading about the kind of lives of Black women in the UK, this was fantastic. I think it's going to be a massive learning process for some people who don't understand what's the racism when it's like institutionalized racism, and how racism is so ingrained into culture in this country. And a lot of white people who are just like, well, I don't treat Black people any different to white people. That's not being an ally to not just Black people, but any person of colour. So this was brilliant. I enjoyed it. I learnt from it. And I think Bernardine Evaristo captured the voices of the different women brilliantly. So I did listen to this on audiobook as well. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. The narrator, I'm going to look for her name because she was amazing. So the narrator was Anna Maria Nabiri. I think I've pronounced her name right. And she is very clearly from the South, probably around London somewhere. The accents that she put on for these different women. So between the narration and the writing, the capturing of the voice of all of these different women was just incredible. I felt like they were real, which I think is one of the top kind of praises that you can give for a book. The fact that this didn't feel like fiction, it felt like non-fiction. So absolutely incredible. I will read more by Bernardine Evaristo, and I would recommend that you read it if you haven't yet. 5 stars. So the final book that I read in January was another e-arc from NetGalley, which was The Household by Stacey Halls. I requested this one, and obviously I was really fortunate to be approved for it because I've read 2 Stacey Halls before. They tend to be historical fiction based in the UK and looking at different issues that women face or women in history have faced. So the first one that I read from her was The Familiars, which was based on looking at women who are going through witch trials. So I thought that that was good. It was okay. I gave that 3 stars. I also read The Foundling, which is based at a hospital in London, you know, Victorian kind of era, where people took their unwanted babies, and these babies were raised into children who were then put out into society to be useful, to either go to work or to work as, you know, servants in big houses and things. They were given the skills as well as being looked after so that they could go to do that. And I thought The Foundling was brilliant. I gave that 4 stars. I do own another one by her, Mrs. England. I don't know what it's about. I've not read it, but because of the previous 2 that I read, I thought, yeah, the new one, The Household, I want to give that a go. So I did. So I read that as an ebook, and what we are following here is a few women who are kind of wayward in society. So a lot of people, young women who have gone into things like prostitution, or they've been thieves and they've ended up in jail. So women who've really lost their way because they were in a very poor Victorian England. What happens is we have a group of characters, one of them who is this kind of very wealthy, rich woman who is very independent of men, which at the time was, you know, unheard of, as well as Charles Dickens, the writer, who is mentioned quite a few times, but we never see him or hear of him, and some other wealthy benefactors as well. And what they do is they set up a cottage just outside of the city where groups of these women can be taken, live there, and be taught the skills to look after themselves and to go into service so that they can work, earn a living as being respectable members of society. So they're basically given a second chance in life. And I thought the idea of this was brilliant. Like, what feminism 101 back in, you know, whatever year it was, the 1800s at some point. And I really liked the concept. But what I would say about the book is that I was very quickly lost by the characters. There were so many names dropped in a small space of time, dropped throughout the whole book, and I didn't feel like we got to really know anyone enough. We got to know a lot from a couple of the young girls' points of view. We got quite a lot from the wealthy benefactor, the rich lady, I'm gonna call her, can't remember her name, and the housekeeper. So we got quite a few points of view, but I didn't feel overly connected to any of them. As the story progressed, I thought, again, you know, the first kind of 100 pages, the settling in, the making the scene was good. And then it kind of started to go in random directions. And I was like, okay, this is obviously going to happen for however they're going to bring the story together and resolve it all at the end. But it just felt a bit higgledy-piggledy. I know that's not a very English term. I felt like the plot just went a bit all over the place. I feel a bit like, did the author sit down and plot this out beforehand, or did they just start and write till the end, which is what I would have done in my GCSE English language. You know, creative writing, I don't think I ever really knew how to plan anything, and you just start writing and see where the story would go. And I felt it was kind of like that. With such a strong concept, I just wanted more. I thought it could have been done far better, but it was still good. I gave it 3 stars. Will I read from Stacey Halls again? Absolutely. Will I go back and read Mrs. England? Absolutely. But I just didn't think it was anything to really rant and rave about. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend, unless you love historical fiction, in which case go for it. As I said, the concept was really strong. I really liked it, but I just felt let down by both the plot and the character progression. Give it a go. Let me know what you think. So those are the 8 books that I read in January. As I said, I feel like I had a really good reading month. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're excited for any. Other than that, I'm going to leave it there for today. As usual, I'll leave links to everything down in the prescription. As usual, I will leave links to everything I've mentioned in the video down in the description below. They'll be affiliates, so I make a small commission, but you don't pay any more if you want to check those books out. Have a good rest of your day, wherever you're doing, wherever you're up to. I keep forgetting things to say. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you're not already and you want to see more from me. Otherwise, I will see you all next time for my February TBR. It's going to be another brilliant month. Bye, everyone.